Hi, my name is Sheena Ladwa. I'm a music manager and also a branding specialist. Really good question. So, when pursuing being an artist, I'll go back. So, I was at a media training day a few years ago, and the first thing that the interviewer said to the artist in the room is, "You're not a band, you're a brand." So, that kind of signifies how important it is to consider yourself as a brand. As hard as that can sometimes be, you really do need to think about that first and foremost. So, your USP, your unique selling point, it really is what identifies you as different, unique to everybody else who's kind of in your lane doing music. And there's a number of things that you can focus on to try and find that. So, one, it could be something as simple as your sound, it could be your message, like your why. So, why are you doing music? Is it because you want to change something that's going on in the world that's significant to you, important to you? So I think it's a broad question, but there are ways of kind of identifying what your USP is. Okay, so my top tips to really help you create your brand, it kind of goes back to the previous question, but first and foremost, I'd say be yourself. It sounds very cliche, but authenticity counts for a lot in this industry. And I think that the industry can really sense when you're being ingenuine or inauthentic. So that would be the first thing. Secondly, I would ask you to think about your messaging. Why are you doing what you're doing? Is it just for the love of it, or is there something else that you want to put out in this world through your music? So that would be my second piece of advice. Thirdly, I'd say think about the aesthetics of your brand. So some of the key components that bring a brand together are things like your logo, your coloring, the photography. You know, you may be someone who wants to do things in black and white, or you may want to play around with the idea of silhouettes because you're not comfortable showing your face. So these kind of things really help when putting your brand together. I'd also say consider yourself as an entrepreneur, because when you are an artist, you essentially are a business, and you have to think about all those different components of running a business. So that will be, what is your product? How much are you investing into it? How are you going to see a return on your investment? Meaning, if you've put X amount of thousands of pounds into making the music, how are you going to sell that music so that you see a return on your investment? How are you going to market that music and get it out to the masses? Because ultimately what you want to do is take this product and put it in front of as many people as possible. So if you really start to see yourself as a bit of a marketeer, an entrepreneur, a business person, I think that actually sets you apart from most people trying to do music and being a musician. And then my final piece of advice is never stop learning, never stop empowering yourself. I always say knowledge is power, and you can go on the internet and at the click of a finger, you can pretty much get as much information as you need about anything that you need to know about. So never stop learning, never stop bettering yourself, because ultimately that puts the power in your hands. And then just one more thing, which I really want to touch on, and it kind of falls under marketing, is data capture. So when I talk about reaching audiences, you've got things like social media, and yeah, definitely by far that's the quickest and easiest way of reaching masses. But there are other things that you can do as well. So thinking about creating a email base. Next time you have a show, have a piece of paper and a pen ready for people to note down their names and give you their email addresses. Because what happens is, as an independent artist, meaning that you're not signed to a label, you now have all this data that even if you switch your team around, even if you move on tomorrow and do something else, you still have this data. Whereas if you're signed to a label and they're capturing the data and they drop you tomorrow, you are literally starting from zero. So be thinking about how to create your data capture as well. And I think they're my top pieces of advice for thinking of yourself as a brand. Wow. I think it's hugely significant to goal set when being an artist and thinking about branding. So again, it kind of goes back to my top tips earlier about how to put your brand together. Definitely create goals within your strategies. So, for example, it might be that you want to reach 5,000 followers on Instagram, and you can have that goal, but then what you need are the steps to get you there, right? And that's why we set goals, so that we can actually put some steps into place. It might be that you want to be playlisted on Spotify. Think about how you're going to go about doing that. So it might be that you connect with music curators, people who put playlists together on Spotify. So have a think about that as well. I think, in answering the question, goal setting is hugely, hugely important. If you don't have a goal or goals, why are you doing it? So one of the ways that I help artists, particularly with the artists that I manage, is to really firstly understand what their vision is in wanting to be an artist. What are their goals for themselves? Because as management and artists working together, if your visions don't align, there's going to be a breakdown eventually. So it's really important. And this goes for any of you working with anyone in your team. Make sure that everyone's on the same page as far as your vision goes. Secondly, when we've really looked at the vision and understood what it is that we're doing and where we're heading, we now have to put some goals into place, as we talked about earlier. So those could be small goals that lead to bigger goals. So for example, it could be, let's get the music ready. This is my direction. This is where I want to go. Okay, so who are we going to work with to make this kind of music? Because what we have to remember is that there's lots of different genres and not all producers produce the same kind of music. So we then start to break that down. When we have the music, which is the most important part, we now have to think about how we're going to put this music out. Who are we going to bring in? Are we going to bring in people like radio pluggers, TV pluggers, PR people, marketing experts? Because this is what essentially a record label would do. So as an independent artist, you're having to do this all yourself, right? So these are some of the things that I will help an artist to think about. And then the other side of my job is to now put people in role and bring the right people into the team to help really execute this strategy and meet the goals that we've put in place. So really and truly, that's how I help artists on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so in terms of building your brand as an independent artist or someone who's starting out, there's so much that you can do yourself, whereby you don't need to be shelling out money and paying people to do it. I think the biggest tools that you have at your disposal are things like social media. Building a brand, essentially, as I said before, was having this entity that you are putting out to as many people as possible. And in this case, your entity is your music and yourselves. So think about things like Instagram, TikTok are, creating some of the stars of the future right now, just by having like one song out. So think about these things that you can use and utilize every day. And then the other thing that I'd say, which is really key, is look at your circle of people. Within your circle, you will probably have everyone that you need. I remember putting teams together and looking around going, wow, like my friend actually is a designer. Like maybe he could design a logo for me. Oh, my brother-in-law's a photographer. Like let me speak to him about doing some photo shoots. Like if you look amongst your people, you will generally find people who can help you. And the thing about those people is that they're passionate about you. Like they care about you and believe in you. So they already stand out compared to people that you might pay to do this job. And then of course, when you're making money, you want to pay your people. I always try and keep business and pleasure separate, because at the end of the day, everyone's trying to make a living from their creativity, their passion, their job. And so I always believe in paying people what they're worth when you can. So yeah, that's some of the things that you can do to start off with. I think the things that make a successful brand are really going over what we've said in this video. So looking at your aesthetics, looking at your marketing, looking at things like your messaging, and of course, making sure that everything you're doing just shouts quality. What you don't want to do in this industry is cut any corners, and you can do things on the cheap without it looking cheap. And I feel like that's something that is a bit of an art form in itself. So yeah, all of those things that we've discussed coming together and having this aesthetic visual representation of you and your music, that people just look at it and it makes sense. So if you think of brands that you love, like strong brands like Nike, for example, yeah, Nike and their strapline, just do it. When you hear that tagline, what does it make you feel? Like there's an emotional connection there. You know, you feel empowered, you feel confident, you feel like you can just do it. So when putting your brand together, think about how you want your audience to feel. Think about how you want your listeners to feel when they hear your music. Think about how you want them to be impacted, even days after they've been exposed to you, your music, your brand, that they're thinking about it going, wow, like I feel super empowered, super inspired. Isn't that why we do what we do? So I think for me, a name that instantly comes to mind as having established a successful brand is Rihanna. Rihanna went from music to beauty to films to absolutely everything. That for me is a successful brand. And I feel like the reason why she's been able to do that, not only because of the teams and the money involved in that, but it's because she always had a strong sense of who she is from the get-go. And I guess another person that stands out is Beyonce. Fierce, empowering, queen, you name it, she is it. So yeah, those two stand out for me.